Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello everybody, welcome to our Wednesday, the Leading Change episode this week with Esther Schmit. Hey Esther, welcome back.
Hi Vasco, so nice seeing you again.
Likewise. So Wednesday is the Change Leadership episode where we explore a change process that you were involved with and, go through the steps, how it happened and what were the important steps, I guess, in that process. And as you go through those, highlight for us the tools, the tips, the tricks, and the techniques you learned back then that you still apply today.
Very nice episode's going to be, I think. What happened is that we went from some Scrum teams in it, like I said, this large company. All of a sudden, they decided to start safe. So all teams they all had to go towards a Scrum way of working as a Scrum team. And the first teams who started already as a Scrum team, that was fine, of course. But a lot of teams, they were forced into doing Scrum. And they of course, as you can imagine, a lot of people didn't want that. So a lot of resistance. And they did it in waves as well. And it was, I don't know if I can, it wasn't a failure, of course, but I think the way of doing this in such a big waves and really demanding teams that they had to do this, that the organization itself wasn't ready for it. So all of a sudden, managers becoming a PO or a CPO or an RTE, and they were still managing. So they were still a manager. That is such a conflict of interest. That is not good for a team, I think.
So what were some of the reactions that you observed? So I imagine there was some kind of communication, right? Like, hey, everybody, we're going to move to safe, so you all need to adopt Scrum. If you haven't yet, then now it's your time to adopt it. And then something happened. What was that something? Like, how did teams react to that?
Well, the first one or two waves, they were fine because of course, they started with the teams and the departments who were already doing Scrum as much as possible. So they were smart starting there. So that was fine. And people were quite okay with it. But then by the time they got to departments who were not doing Scrum, there was so much resistance and like, no, I'm not doing it. No, I don't want this. And what's happening? And so much resistance. And then it's really, really, really difficult to get a team on board.
So tell me one thing, were these teams invited to go to a training to learn what Scrum was and what safe was? Or were they just told, hey, from now on, you're doing Scrum? Like, how did that work?
They received an online information. It was more informative session of a day online with all the teams. So I think there were sometimes 100 people joining that session. So it wasn't a training. At least I cannot call that a training if there's like 100 people in a Zoom session or team session. And people don't really dare to ask questions. What I did notice that once somebody would ask a question or say, okay, how is this going to work for us? And why are we doing this? And then people would get kind of like, yoo, this is the start shot. So people like, yeah, I don't like it. I don't want it. Da, 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 da. So then all of a sudden you would really notice that people were not too happy about it. But yeah, difficult times that they did manage in the end. But yeah.
I guess you can always dictate the process, right? Like what you can't is to make people work within the process. So I'm wondering what kind of workarounds and fake process adherence happen in that organization, because I've seen many teams that are forced to adopt a process, whether it's Scrum or Kanban or Safe or whatever, and then they say they do it, but they don't really. Did you see that happening as well in that organization?
Yes, of course. They would say they would do it, only have like a daily stand-up. Then, yeah, we're doing it. Yeah, we have a daily stand-up on Wednesday.
Yeah, on Wednesday. That kind of says it all, doesn't?
Yeah. So yeah, things like that, and it's it was very difficult. Also, management wasn't ready, so they would still ask, for example, instead of going to the reviews, they would constantly ask the PO or team members what the status was of things and when they were going to deliver. So when are you going to deliver this? When is this going to be ready? So that was also very difficult. I think management wasn't ready they did get quite some trainings from more on agile way of working, but then it's very difficult to all of a sudden make them do that change, actually change.
Yeah, for me, the other question that comes up is, okay, but how did they support these people after the change was communicated? So I imagine this one day online training was more of an information, kind of setting the stage for what was about to happen. But I mean, you and I know that it takes quite a while for teams to adopt a new way of working. Scrum is a very easy process framework. But even Scrum, which is easy, requires a lot of effort and practice and trial and error to get to an acceptable level of performance within that framework. Was that support provided to the organization?
Yes, in the way that they had an Agile coaching competence, and so they had quite a few Agile coaches to help the teams and the Scrum Masters and management to adopt this way of working. And that's what happened with me as well. I went from being a Scrum Master, I joined as an Agile coach, because the train I was working in as a Scrum Master, I knew exactly what was going on and with those Scrum Masters and what they would be running into. So it was really nice for me at that point to be part of the Agile coaching competence, where we would really have different workshops set up and things like that to help the teams as well to adopt it.
And that help is quite critical, because I was just thinking back to the Monday story when you were relating how you started as a Scrum Master, and there's a lot of teams that start just like you did, but in the role of the team members, right? Like they go into a new process without ever having practiced anything similar before. And that support is so critical, because there will be a lot of questions, there will be a lot of confusion.
Yeah, definitely a lot of confusion, a lot of questions. Again, all those questions. And so it was good to ask the question. So I would ask questions, of course. I would try to find out what was really going on within the teams. And with the Scrum Masters, I also started a Scrum Master community, so where all the Scrum Masters would learn from each other, because that's what I missed. Like I said on Monday, that's what I missed as well as a Scrum Master, to have like a community where you can learn from each other. So that's what I set up as well in that period. So Scrum Masters can learn from each other, share experiences, and also go from there. And to know that you're not the only one in that struggle, in any struggle. So in a struggle of getting your team to adapt this way of working, or in any way. So that really helped. Well, me as well, but all the Scrum Masters, and I think that was a good a good start as well, or way of helping the teams to adapt it a little bit better.
Absolutely. And then, of course, it highlights how important it is to have podcasts like this one and the summits like yours, the Online Scrum Master Summit, that create this feeling of having a group of peers we can learn from, right? Within and even outside the organization. Thank you for sharing that story, Esther.
You're more than welcome.
Leading change is one of the core skills we must acquire, but it is only one of the steps towards our success as Scrum Masters. Tomorrow, on Success Thursday, we will talk about how to define success for the Scrum Master role. We'll cover tips on how to measure your way to that position, and most importantly, how to develop that focus on continuous improvement that is as important for Scrum Masters as it is for teams. See you tomorrow. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.